This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment.
Welcome back to Weights and Wealth. It's the number one podcast, I believe, at least I heard, for the 5 Fs, which we're the only podcast with our 5 Fs. So kind of gives us a leg up. But for those of you that don't know, the 5 Fs are faith, family, fitness, finances, and freedom. Those are the 5 Fs here. We do different episodes on those different topics. If you're newer to the show, if you're our 9th listener, not our 8th listener, then we don't just do weights and wealth topics. Sometimes we'll do a freedom topic. We have a book club episode coming up on the wealth of, the myth of capitalism. Yep. But our last book club was on the Liberty Amendments by Mark Levin, more of a freedom topic. So scroll down and check that one out. We really liked that episode. We thought it was a good one. Yeah. The shout out for this episode is Tom from Alexandria, Virginia. He's a new listener and he gave us good feedback on the show, how we can improve, so we'll take that into account, try to get this audio a little better. It's still learning with the new studio here in this small room. I think we just need to put some noise canceling stuff up on the walls.
Probably, the AC doesn't help.
The vent's right next to us.
Yeah, so but we can't exactly change that. So if you want the audio to improve, help us make money by sharing and spreading the word so that we can make more than one penny.
Yeah, side note, this podcast does not make money. That's not our goal. Our goal is to bring information to you, the listeners, and to help kind of win back the culture war here as we view it.
Yes.
The weights wisdom for this week is to take your lifts through different ranges of motion. What I mean by this is including different variations. So if you go to the gym and all you ever do is the same main lift, say you're working on your deadlift, but all you ever do is a conventional deadlift, you'd benefit a lot from doing a snatch grip deadlift or a deficit deadlift, improving that range of motion, making it greater. And then that'll make you stronger in the bottom of that deadlift. And then also, if you're able to get, some gyms have big wheeled plates, like at our gym right now, we have these big 70-pound plates that are really big and they help raise that up off the ground more. Or you could put plates under it or pads underneath it, decrease that range of motion, use more weight so that when you go back to doing a regular conventional deadlift, you've done a higher weight, albeit through a decreased range of motion. Your CNS and your body will feel like it's not the heaviest weight you've ever pulled off the ground.
Yeah. It's a lot like people even do that stuff for like back squats and stuff. They'll do like what's called a walkout, where they'll load up the barbell with, let's say your max is 315, maybe they'll put 405 on, so it's like significantly more than your max, but you can carry it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like a safe amount that you can carry. You probably couldn't squat it though. And so they'll literally just unrack the barbell, walk out a couple steps like they're going to squat, and then hold it for a little while and then walk it back in. So you're just kind of preparing your body, you're priming your CNS. You're getting it used to these weights that it's never done before. So there's a lot to be said for that style.
Yeah, and something, Nick went through a big phase in college where he was doing a lot of negatives on bench, where he was having someone assist him, but he was loading up with a more than his max weight. I can't, my brain's not working. Not sub-maximal, but more than maximal weight.
Yes.
And he would do negatives with that and have someone help him lift it up. And that way he would just get used to not benching, but being in that bench shape and practicing on the way down, having more weight than his max, so that when he went to then go retest his max or do doubles or triples, it didn't feel as heavy because he was used to pushing against a greater force.
Yeah, and control of the negative is a huge thing in strength training. Like if you're just kind of letting it fall on you, like you are not, really recruiting your body's like mechanisms in the appropriate way.
You're putting more tension on the joint than on the muscle.
Yeah. And you're just not setting yourself up for like success. Like you're moving the weight is not moving you. Mm-hmm. That's what I used to always tell the guys that I would work with who, you know, like I would be like kind of helping them fix their form and stuff like that. A lot of guys, particularly on bench, just like to let it bounce off the chest.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, cheat reps have a position, but they're not really something you should do all the time or very regularly. But it's like really controlling that negative. You can actually come out from a position of strength at the bottom of your rep rather than just literally getting smacked by 315 pounds in your chest and then trying to regain control as you're going back up.
The wobbly arms.
Yeah. So control your negative. That's a huge aspect of, you know, proper strength training. So for the article, also controlling negatives, we have a doctor here who conducted a 9-year study on prepubescent boys and girls who identify as the opposite gender, and she refuses to publish this $10 million study that shows that these puberty blockers actually did not help the mental health of these troubled individuals. And the reason she cites is that she fears it would be weaponized against kids in this mental health group, basically saying that she's not going to publish these scientific results because it would potentially harm her revenue stream. That's how I'm interpreting it.
What's the doctor's name?
Johanna Olson Kennedy.
Yeah, so it's a 9-year, $10 million study through the NIH.
95 kids with an average age of 11.
Yeah, and her original reason for not releasing the study was that she didn't want it to be weaponized against trans individuals. But then she also, after that, wound up saying, once she was kind of pressed more about that, because it doesn't sound like a very good reason, she then started to say, well, it didn't show any like mental health improvements, but that's because all the kids were already in really good mental health shape when the study was started. But when the study began, she had also said that a quarter of them were like really depressed and anxious
and suicidal.
Yeah. Like, so I don't know how she can say that
two
afterwards.
Things square. Yeah. So like that's, I mean, I don't think that's something inappropriate that I can say that, you know, it's going to harm her revenue stream if she does this. But to me, I mean, that seems like the basic thing here.
Yeah.
Right? Because
I think the bigger takeaway from this is this is exactly why people have lost so much trust in our institutions. Mm-hmm. You know, there's this $10 million study done through the NIH population of 70 kids, preteens,
95.
And then 95. And then the results are not released simply because the doctors leading the study didn't like the results of it.
Yes, it doesn't agree with the narrative.
Yeah, and that happens a lot in science. Max Lugavere has talked a lot about how this happened with Alzheimer's, how there was like a fraudulent study done, and then that hypothesis, the beta amyloid plaque hypothesis, was like the holy grail of Alzheimer's and dementia research, and you couldn't really publish anything against it. And so people just kept, for 20 years, all the research done was within that beta amyloid plaque hypothesis, even though it turned out to be built off completely fraudulent studies and was not actually correct. And that just sets back the field of science so many years. And, you know, you have people that have been heavily impacted by things like Alzheimer's in their life that then donate a large amount of money to research, and the research is all just
being siphoned into dead ends.
Yeah, or research that does show promise is not published because it doesn't fall in line with the consensus. But science isn't supposed to be a consensus.
No,
you're supposed to continually ask questions and create new hypotheses and test them. So
that's one of the largest issues, I think, with popular culture today, is that people mistake credentialed consensus with the truth. And just because 95% of people who have a degree in X field think this does not mean that they're right.
Yeah.
You know, like human beings are a lot more like lemmings than we like to admit. You know, like if the career incentives in your field are lining up with this avenue of approach, most people are just, you know, we're social animals. Like we're going to go along with whatever is getting people ahead, right? Whatever's the easy track, the smooth way. And people don't like to buck trends. They don't like to stand up and be like, hey, you're wrong. Or like, I don't agree with this, you know, especially if you're like coming up, you know, if you don't have tenure, or if you're not like an established figure already. I thought I was going to
Phantom sneeze.
Yeah. It's a dangerous thing to do for your career, and which is kind of this like difficult topic because, you know, I mean, back in, you know, the 16th century and, you know, like the Renaissance and medieval era and, you know, the Enlightenment and stuff like that, a lot of science and like research was funded by private fortunes and like patrons, stuff like that. They didn't necessarily, like, I'm sure they had agendas, but
Catholic Church had a large influence over a lot of research that was done. Yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily like as directed as it is today. I'm sure like I said, I'm sure there were still like agendas that they wanted. They were like, hey, can you find this out for me? You know, if this is real or if this is possible. Whereas today, you have private corporations that have like a market incentive to get research that backs up their product line or, you know, what they have in development. So that's a little different than like the king being like, hey, I want to find out if I can make gold from lead, you know, and then you find out a lot about the periodic table from that. Right. And so we learn about like modern chemistry from, you know, the ancient science of alchemy. But now it's like, oh, well, Coca-Cola is sponsoring this study on the effects of, you know, Red 40 and high fructose corn syrup. And of course, they're going to find out that there's no negative health effects, you know, because
we'll be getting into that later in this episode. Defeating reckless cravings and spending. We're going to talk about artificial sweeteners. So we'll be getting into that. But Sean, your phantom sneeze reminded me of when I was over here a few weeks ago at night, and Sean sneezed, and baby Killian woke up immediately. Yeah. And Sean's wife was like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. It was a very loud sneeze. But that made me wonder if you want to maybe, we have a large audience in like the 20 to 30 range, or not a large audience. A lot of our audience is in that 20 to 30 range. So Sean, maybe if you want to talk to that audience that's getting into being parents or are new parents, if you want to talk about what you guys have done with Sleep for Killing, because you guys started with like a non-sleep style, like a
non-sleep training,
training, but now you guys are shifting over to sleep training. Do you want to maybe just talk about that and how you've seen both sides? Or
so basically, Killian's around 6 months, and for the first 6 months, essentially, he slept in the bassinet next to my wife, and if he woke up, he would, you know, squawk, and my wife would just pick him up, feed him for a little bit, and then put him back down when he passed out. And however many times that happened, that's what we would do.
You guys also didn't have like a regulated sleep time though, right?
No, we were kind of doing whatever we wanted to do. Yeah. And it was like, baby's going to go to bed when baby goes to bed. You know, like if we're out and he passes out, that's fine. Which I don't think is a bad thing, because he got used to being around people and like...
Yeah, we'd go out to dinner or something, and Killian would just sleep at the restaurant.
Yeah, he'll sleep at the restaurant, or he'll hang out with everybody. Like, he's very sociable. So I think there were benefits to that.
It certainly freed up you guys, because it wasn't like, oh, we have to be home by this time to get him down to bed. Since he wasn't used to like a schedule, it was kind of like whatever.
Yeah, but now we've kind of decided, like, since he's too big for the bassinet now, we're moving him into the crib in the other room. And so now we're doing kind of a bedtime routine. I would say 6 days out of the week we're doing it. on average. Some weeks obviously we're doing all 7 days. Other weeks maybe we're somewhere, like we're visiting family and he doesn't get a bath that night, but usually we go dinner, bath, hang out in his nursery a little bit, read him some books, stuff like that, kind of wind down, and then he'll have a second snack, and then he goes to bed. So Madison usually takes, like I usually do, like we kind of split dinner, like one of us feeds him. We're kind of starting solids, the blended fruit and stuff like that. And then I clean him up, I give him a bath, and get him ready for bed. Madison will usually read to him and feed him and then put him down initially. And I've been trying to take the first like 2 wake ups if they're like before 1 a.m.
Yeah.
So like this is like for the previous 6 months, like I sleep like a rock. Like unless Killian like kicked me in the head when he was having his 2 a.m. snack, I was not waking up unless it was really, really bad and like Madison needed a break. But so now I get to get up and rock him to sleep and stuff like that. And like we started using a white noise machine too. That actually helped a lot. Surprisingly, like we didn't expect it, but we decided, like, because we went through like a 2-week period of when he was initially transferring into the other room where he could only sleep for like 20 minutes at a time, and it was just not sustainable. So we're like, okay, let's see what a white noise machine would do, and it's worked pretty well.
Have you noticed, what differences have you noticed since you transitioned from like the non-scheduled sleep to more like a regimented time schedule that he goes to sleep every night?
As far as him, or like,
as far as him, yeah.
Not a ton. No, I mean, he sleeps when he sleeps, and like some nights he sleeps 4 or 5 hours at a stretch, but he would do the same thing in the bassinet, so it's like, and I feel like with raising children, there's no one size fits all approach. There's no one thing that's going to work all the time. Like no matter what you do, you're going to have nights where the baby just doesn't want to sleep because he has a tummy ache or, something's going on and maybe he's going through a growth spurt and has extra energy at night and just wants to play. Yeah. Like that's just how it is. So it's, I would say, like, don't be afraid to like try new things. Like we were generally against the white noise machine for a long time, but after 2 weeks of him not really sleeping well at all, and therefore that affects Madison a lot, and then me, we were like, it might as well try it, and it's been working. And I don't think we're gonna keep it going for forever. Maybe like in a month or 2 we might go back with no white noise machine, see if that's any better, because you don't want to establish that dependency on that. But it's a solution that's working right now.
Yeah. And
as long as it's not like something that's going to negatively affect them, which I don't think a white noise machine really does, I think it's always worth trying. So, yeah.
Should we move on to, you want to do cravings or spending first?
We can go over the spending, because I think that with, avoiding reckless spending, that is really, like some people do, like get addicted to it, like what was that? There was like that super kind of almost like cult popular movie back in, like probably when our older sisters were late high school. It was like the Shopaholic movie. Yeah, it was basically just about this like female journalist. I had 5 sisters, so I knew what this was. And basically it's about this chick that's like addicted to clothes shopping and gets herself into horrible credit card debt, and then starts writing an anonymous column about how she's a shopaholic. Okay. And like just cannot stop spending. And it's kind of funny. Like she goes through like all these different things. Like she puts her credit cards into like an ice cube, and so that she can't use it, like just all this ridiculous stuff. So she's just swimming in that. And it's kind of this whole like redemption story about how she like figures out how to like stop, like get over this addiction. And I think that's kind of like an extreme, obviously, like, you know, fictionalized example of people who just simply can't stop spending money that isn't theirs, you know? Because it's not like she was using debit cards. It's kind of a warning about credit card debt and stuff like that. And that is a big thing. A lot of people do struggle with money management in that way, but it's not the same as food and like substances where you can actually become like physically addicted. Like, I think it's kind of more of like a mental addiction, you know, like they're just like, they get that dopamine feedback from buying new things all the time. And I think a lot of it with reckless spending is also just convenience and laziness. Yeah. You know, like a lot of people will just eat out all the time instead of cooking, or they'll, you know, DoorDash things instead of, you know, going and picking it up. And so like they're essentially getting a private taxi for their burrito to come to their house. You know, it's a little, you know, extreme. And I'm not against that stuff, like, period, flat out. It makes sense sometimes. But if that's what you're doing every meal, you know, then you're obviously going to run into some financial trouble. So obviously the easiest way to not get in the habit of reckless spending is to simply not be a reckless spender in the first place. You know, like come up with systems that prevent you from getting into these situations, because habits are hard to break. But if you do have this issue, there are like some basic fixes that you can do. And some that worked for me, like when I was trying to pay down my student debt, you know, it looks like my student loans and stuff. What I like to do was, one, you want to keep your subscriptions pretty low, obviously, right? Yeah. Like, so you want as little money coming out from your paycheck towards miscellaneous things like a Netflix subscription, Amazon Prime, all those different memberships. Like obviously a gym membership, that's probably worth it. If you're getting like, you know, Butcher Box, stuff like that, you know, things that are like needs. Right. Yes.
Yeah. Just start look through your bill and categorize needs versus wants.
Yes.
And then maybe before you do that, say just to yourself, okay, I'm going to cut out 50% of my wants.
Yeah.
You know, and then just go through and pick which ones are.
Yeah. Like you can save a crap ton of money that way. And so once you do that, then what I would usually do was I would take out, let's say you get paid every 2 weeks, I would take out $200 cash. So I have $200 or maybe $300, right? That's your gas money and just spending money. So that you can like, oh, I'm going to go buy lunch this week, or I'm going to go get a coffee, or I'm going to, you know, just do random stuff. Because if you have a, you know, if you have a decent job and you're not like scraping by penny to penny, but you have these financial goals, right? Whether it's paying down credit card debt, student loan debt, saving for something, that's an easy way to like really like physically cap your spending. You know, delete your credit cards from your phone and don't carry your credit cards with you. And if you just carry cash, that's all you have, you know? Yeah. So like you literally cannot spend more. It's not possible. Like you can't go into, you know, the Wendy's and be like, hey, I'll pay you Tuesday for this.
Yeah.
You know?
I was talking to a mentor of mine. He's not the best with money, but his wife is like a really financially savvy person. So he had a bunch of debt when they got married, and he was just like a chronic spender. But then when he got married, his wife was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to make it so you can't spend any money. It's just, we're each going to get $500 a month, which, I mean, they had more resources than probably a lot of listeners.
Yeah.
But we're each going to get $500 a month, and that's the money that you can spend.
Yeah,
and once it's
that's
out,
your fun money.
You can't spend any more money than that, and you can roll it over. So then he said, like, at the end of the year, she was buying like all this nice stuff.
Yeah.
Like more, like fewer items, but more expensive. Yeah. And he was asking her, how do you have all this money? And she was like, well, I saved it every month, and then now I'm able to buy nicer things, whereas every single month he was spending all $500. But that's the same thing as like that cash point that you pointed out. Like if you set aside that money and that's your money for spending on just random
like miscellaneous things.
Yeah.
Eating out, doing fun stuff, you know, stuff like that. Like
and I'm not just stick to it.
Yeah. It's actually pretty simple, and it's actually there's a psychological aspect to it. And, you know, like Dave Ramsey talks about it. I think Dave Ramsey is a good resource for a lot of people just starting out. Like he's not the all father of, personal finance. And there's a lot of things that he says that I don't agree with, but I think that his point of, the psychological pain of spending cash and like actually seeing your, bills get smaller and smaller. You start out with, let's say $6 bills, and now you only have $4 $20 bills left.
And it feels more real when you're swiping a credit card. It doesn't feel real. Although for some people, that is not the case. We've talked about on the show before how my wife feels like cash is monopoly money because she just looks at like the bank and the credit card statement. So that's the money that she views as money. And then if she just has cash, she doesn't feel like it's real money because it's not impacting those numbers on the phone in the app. But then that's the opposite of the way I view it. If I'm spending cash, it's like, ooh, gosh, that hurts. And I think for a lot of people, like they already know this. People go on vacation and ahead of time they take $800 cash, and that's the money they have to spend on their vacation, and they don't use their credit cards while they're gone. So people know this, but implement it if you think that would help you.
So it's definitely a useful approach. Sorry. And then we also have avoid eating out. Kind of mentioned that already, but preparing for your day with like the snacks and whole foods based meals that'll help you remain satiated. If you're buying in bulk from Costco, like right now, like I eat a lot. So like I make my breakfast in the morning before I go to work. And then after my workout in the morning and when I'm at work before lunch, I have an RX bar, a Greek yogurt, and a protein shake, which is like 65 grams of protein and, some carbs and fats and stuff like that. And then I have my lunch at lunchtime, and then I come home and I have dinner. So it's a good amount of food, but I shop in bulk and I, bring it in, and then I have 2 weeks of food of these, quote unquote snacks that are costing me like $1 per, rather than going to the gas station, getting that same snack and spending $6.
RX bar is $3.50 instead of $1.
Yeah. Exactly. So there's ways to, kind of have the same quote unquote quality of life if you just buy in a different manner and at a different time, and, just like making your coffee at home versus going to Starbucks. So that's like the trope. That's the trope though, but it does add up. But that's also not something that's going to make or break, Yeah. So basically just focus on, shopping in bulk and like actually preparing for your day versus just kind of winging it. Like I think just changing your mentality about your day to day is actually going to cause you to be a little more deliberate. And if you're more deliberate, you're not just going to be throwing a random $20 here, random $20 there. And then at the end of the month, you get your credit card statement and you're like, oh gosh, I spent, 4 times more than last month because I did not think about anything that I was doing. But if you stick to a diet, if you have discipline in other aspects of your life, essentially what I'm saying, it will translate into financial discipline a lot of the time, So if you're on a regimented, fitness and nutritional regimen, you're not going to deviate from that. And a lot of the reckless spending people have is, just buying random things that they don't need because it looks tasty or, other things like that. And that kind of goes into one of our other things here is getting into low cost or no cost hobbies like fitness, like running, hiking, reading, intramural sports, volunteering. Like if what you're into is a super expensive hobby, right? Maybe golf, pretty expensive. You're probably dropping at least $100 a round. Other things like even hunting, motorsports, stuff like that, those add up. And I'm not saying don't do it if you love it, but just figure out a way to make it like fit within your budget. And then finally, we have focusing on your work, right? So if you find yourself online shopping at work or, running out to, get lunch and then, you're buying gas station snacks or, stuff like that. If you just put enough on your plate and like, ask your boss like, hey, is there anything I can do for you? Or, helping out your teammates, being like, hey, I'll help you build that, or like, organize this thing or proofread that. You're just adding more to your plate so that you're too busy to go and, waste your money. Right.
Yeah.
And the flip and the upside of this is, yes, you're more busy at work. One, your day's going to go by faster. Two, you're probably going to be setting yourself up for, a promotion or a raise, right? Because if you kind of become this absolute machine at work, if you become this, useful individual, that gives you leverage, right? Because you can then kind of parlay that into career advancement, and your income will increase as your career progresses, as long as you avoid income creep, right? Or lifestyle creep, I should say. So that's another way to kind of, cut down on your reckless spending, is to simply just get busier at the things that you were already supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And finally, the last thing we have is just, I think, Ted, you added this, but buying a wallet that has a passcode on it.
Oh, that was not me. That might have been Nick.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's an interesting
Wallet with a
technique.
passcode. I've never seen that.
I've never seen one of those. Maybe that's something that, he knows. It's a secret CPA secret. Is they, carry around mini safes in their pockets. But that definitely turns it from like a unconscious decision of like, hey, I'm just going to get this, to conscious, being like, oh, I have to unlock my wallet. But it's kind of the same thing as like the cash and stuff like that. Kind of just make your money like a little harder to waste. Like I think Ted has already talked about this. He has allotments already put in where like, I think it's like $500 a month, where that's just automatically into a savings account that you do not touch. Yep. And so like the money that actually hits the checking account, you've already saved, you've already invested, things are already going in the right direction. So all that money that actually is accessible to you is quote unquote excess.
Yeah.
Yes. So that kind of summarizes our stuff here. But I think right now we can dive into the weights section, aka, your reckless cravings.
Yeah. So with reckless cravings, one of the biggest things I find is if you just switch over to a whole food diet, it will drastically decrease your cravings. Once you stop eating processed foods, you just don't wind up craving them as much. It's really crazy. I know you've noticed this before when you've gone into 100% whole foods, but it really just creates this real dramatic effect. This is also why a lot of people, when they go like keto or carnivore, their cravings start to disappear.
Yeah.
Part of it is that they're eating less carbs, but also a large part of it is that they've stopped eating these foods that are engineered to want them to make them eat more. Getting that dopamine spike every time you eat processed foods, well, your body is going to want that again and again and again.
That was a huge thing for me when I was in airborne school. So I had just graduated Ranger School, right? Like the week before. And I went into a gas station to use the bathroom, and I walked by the candy aisle, and I was like, oh, because in Ranger School, like you get what they like Dog X and Darby, and all these different like
you get things. 1 MRE a day, and they're kind of starving you. But then between each phase, they give you this feast of junk food where you eat like 10,000 calories in a day.
Yes, it's pretty disgusting, but it's
just turns you into a sugar addict.
Yeah, so like you develop a sugar addiction essentially in Ranger School, and I remember feeling like wow, like I really, really, really want that Snickers bar.
Yeah.
Like it was like a conscious decision that I had to make to be like, no, I'm not buying that.
Yeah.
And it went away after a couple of days because I immediately went into like a very heavy whole foods diet right away because I knew that my metabolism was totally screwed.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, like I'm going to put on weight anyways, so I might as well make it the best weight I possibly can, so I was trying to eat as many, like as much good dairy, meat, and like healthy carbs as I could to avoid, kind of like having a Burger King physique. because that's never good.
Yeah. I find that, like, personally at least, your palate winds up shifting pretty quickly. For me, by the end of a week, for sure, my palate has entirely shifted, and I'm like, sweet potato starts to taste really sweet again, and I'm not craving those foods. For some clients that I've had that have gone to a whole food diet in like a phase that we're doing with their nutrition, like sometimes 2 or 3 days, they'll say like, oh, I'm not even craving these foods anymore. Yeah. So probably between like 3 days to a week for most people, you'll notice your palate will shift. But speaking of the palate, artificial sweeteners are huge in our food economy. Yeah. Diet soda is probably the most prevalent example. But I decided to go a little bit more into the artificial sweetener realm here and went through some studies because they do have a really interesting effect. As far as sweetness, if you just compare it to sucrose, just normal sugar, saccharin is 300 times sweeter than sucrose. Aspartame is 200 times sweeter. Sucralose is 600 times sweeter. And stevia is 100 to 300 times sweeter. Wow. So these artificial sweeteners are insanely sweet. And a lot of people say, oh, artificial sweeteners aren't bad, they'll help you lose weight. I was going through studies. There's some meta-analyses that will say, yeah, it helps you lose weight if you switch over to these artificial sweeteners and start drinking diet soda instead of regular soda. But I think there is definitely a rebound effect in there because even if you lose weight because you switch from 150 calorie soda twice a day to a diet with zero, well, now your taste buds have started to shift and your brain has started to shift where you're expecting that extra sweetness. Yeah. So then once you stop drinking diet soda, but while you're drinking that, well, now everything that you eat, you expect to be sweeter. Yeah. So now berries and sweet potato don't taste sweet anymore.
Can we also talk about how like the concept of diet soda? Like it's like a lead balloon.
It's a famous Trump quote. I've never seen a thin person drink diet soda.
Diet Coke.
No, but I mean, especially in the fitness space, like in like not even like pro bodybuilding, but just within the fitness space with people that are like trying to build a really good physique, a lot of people will start drinking diet soda. I prefer to just use like seltzer, not hard seltzer, but just like sparkling water. Yeah. And the carbonation, I love the carbonation, so I love sparkling water. But
what do you call them? No, I understand what you're saying.
My wife and I call them Sparkle Pops.
Sparkle Pops, very nice, very nice. But yeah, it's 100% a this kind of false crutch that people think is going to help them in the long run, but it only undermines other aspects of your nutrition. Like Ted said, it's like getting this higher and higher dopamine kind of feedback loop. And so you expect everything else to kind of rise in tandem with it. And if, that your whole foods, but you're drinking, diet soda, well, the whole foods are going to start to taste less and less, good.
Yeah, I would say like a lot of people wouldn't want to move from drinking diet soda to regular soda because of the calorie increase. But I would say if you're at the point where your taste bud axis has become so skewed towards these artificial sweeteners that you don't think fruits are sweet, if you don't think that a handful of blueberries is sweet or a sweet potato is sweet, you should probably switch from that diet soda to regular soda and then from regular soda to sparkling water if you don't want to just make that shift right away. And I think that sparkling water is a really great crutch here because it's still providing you with that carbonation. So you're not moving straight from super sweet diet soda to water. You're at least getting some aspect of that drink with the carbonation.
I mean, and there's ways to get those sweet drinks, like you could add like raw honey to something. Like that was something that I did for a while was I would have just like plain Greek yogurt, berries, a granola, and then like a tablespoon of honey.
Yeah. That's how we make our yogurt. We just add honey and maple syrup.
It's extremely sweet. Mm-hmm. Like you would be surprised. And that really kind of, if that's something that you're struggling with, is like needing that kind of like, you have a sweet tooth, like that's a great way to, just get it. Just take out the sugar, take out the soda. You just go for honey. And if you want sparkling water, I'm sure you can figure out some ridiculous cocktail to make. Yeah. And just substitute honey for any type of, odd sugar or artificial sweetener. You're probably going to be better off.
Yeah, and normally when you're eating sugar, your body has this natural GLP-1 release. GLP-1s, if you think of, what is it, Wegovy or Ozempic, those are GLP-1 agonists, so they act in the same way and play off the same receptors. But what that GLP-1 release does is it spikes your insulin to bring down your blood sugar, and this effect doesn't happen the same way with those artificial sweeteners. A lot of studies have more so on animal. I haven't found many good human studies. There's been a lot of studies done on mice and rats that show that these artificial sweeteners have a pretty negative effect on the gut microbiome, and that actually changes your blood sugar response and leads to more elevated levels where you're not getting that insulin release and creates insulin resistance. So this not having a good response to insulin and building up insulin resistance is not good for you. It creates inflammation. It obviously messes up your blood sugar. It leads to pre-diabetes, diabetes. It's one of the hallmarks of metabolic syndrome, so which increases chances of heart attack, stroke, cancer. But there was a study that I did find. It was a really small population, really not like the best study, but it was a human study with how artificial sweeteners impact the gut microbiome, and it found the same exact result that the rodent studies found, where in 4 out of the 7 people that hadn't been using artificial sweeteners that started using them for like 7 days, by day 4 they had their blood sugar response had significantly deviated and was elevated, and they were building insulin resistance.
Why do you think that that has not been studied as much? Why do you think you have difficulty finding?
Yeah, I don't know, because in the health and fitness space for years, talking a decade and a half, 2 decades, there have been people on the fringes that have been saying, don't use artificial sweeteners, it'll impact your gut microbiome.
So you're a fringe guy?
But I like to use studies when possible, so that I'm not just falling into bro science. And there haven't been a lot of good human studies, but I think part of why is that the gut microbiome is so hard to study. Usually when you're reading through these gut microbiome studies, they're using fecal transplants and looking through fecal matter to try to study the gut microbiome. We know so little about the gut microbiome compared to other things in science. I think that's partially why these studies haven't really been done as much. And then I think what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, a lot of these studies are going to be funded by the companies that use artificial sweeteners like Coke or Pepsi, where they're not going to want to fund a study that finds a negative result. It's just like how pharma, 70% of FDA funds for studies comes from big pharma. So it's hopefully with RFK we start to see a massive overhaul of the NIH and how these study funds are allocated and stuff like that.
And that's not to say that we don't want research and science to continue, but we just want a little more of a moat between the science trademark and those people who are funding it, right? Because if you don't have independent research, truly independent, how can you be, sure that these results are actually true? Because there's 100 ways 100 million ways to rig something or to engineer an outcome of a study.
Anybody that has taken like a high school or
statistics
college
class or anything.
I was talking high school or college like chemistry lab.
Oh yeah.
Where you're going through and collecting data. I'm sure everyone that's taken one of those labs in here, like that's listening, can think back to a time where they were collecting data and they were like, oh, if this data point, if this concentration was up or down one and the acidity was more in line with what I want it to be, my results would look better and it would be much easier to write the report.
Yeah.
Do you change it? Do you erase it? Like, it doesn't really matter. You're just following these steps in the lab to write a paper that you're not using the results for anything, you know? Like, I know there were times where I kind of messed with the data a little bit just to make the report writing easier. Because there's not really any consequence to that lab report, you know. You're not breaking ground on anything. It's not a graduate program where you're
doing research. You're getting reps in at data collection.
Yeah, but I mean, it's so easy to do that. And with these studies, a lot of times, like, you can't find the actual raw data. When things are peer reviewed, that peer review isn't looking at the raw data. They're just reading through the methods, analysis, conclusion. They don't actually get to look at the raw data, which, going back to the Alzheimer's fudged data, is how stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
No one actually reviews the raw data. So,
and that's another issue that we have. Like we said earlier, the consensus of the credentialed, you know, it's like, that's a huge problem. Like, that should not be like a standard that is as respected and as almost dogmatic as it is today, right? Just because 8 guys agree with you doesn't mean you're right. You know, like, there's a lot of examples throughout history, whether in science, politically, in any aspect of human life. Just because the majority agrees doesn't mean it's right or good, you know? So I think that I think, you know, talking about like the culture war and stuff like that, I think one of the things that I really hope to see, and I try and practice myself, is to don't be afraid to be like the person that kind of pushes back and is like, hey, well, I don't agree with this method, or I think we could do it better this way, or just find some way to, you know, just like maintain your independence, you know.
Yeah,
like,
don't be afraid to be that person that's drinking a seltzer instead of a Diet Coke. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week for our book club, The Myth of Capitalism. So if you want to start reading that, if we've mentioned a couple times that we're doing this book, so if you haven't read it yet,
it is on Spotify Premium.
You can listen to it as well.
Yes. Yep. So that makes it very easy. So highly recommend the book. Very, very interesting. Multiple earmarks, and, you know, like, notes that I've taken on it in my own personal notes app, because I listen to it. It's a very interesting, kind of insightful look at the modern economy, because, like the name implies, we don't truly live in a free market. Yeah. You know, and so
we'll get to that next week, though.
Yes.
So tune in next week if you're interested in that episode. All right. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth. And don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.